Today's lesson is Courage on the Front Lines. Why war reporters matter. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to continue talking about journalists or reporters who cover news in the world in war zones. Okay, there are lots of things happening in the world. You could cover the world of sports or entertainment or politics or whatever. Those are relatively safe, but of course we still need reporters to cover violent episodes that are going on in the world, like wars in various places, like in Ukraine or Gaza or Sudan or wherever. So lots of wars are still going on, and people need to know about what's going on. So war reporters matter in that regard. We need to have them even though the work is very dangerous.
Absolutely. Yesterday we had the story of Marie Colvin as a bit of a way to sort of illustrate this. She was a great war reporter who covered many important conflicts over the last 20 or 30 years. She lost an eye covering a war in Sri Lanka after an explosion went off near her. And then, unfortunately, in 2012, she was killed in Syria covering the civil war there. So it shows that war reporters don't just put themselves in danger in certain places of injury or something. They actually can lose their lives and have, in many cases, covering important stories that we all benefit from. So let's get into our article today and read a little bit more about why war reporting is so dangerous and why also it is so important.
For obvious reasons, working in a war zone is exceptionally dangerous. Journalists face bombings, sniper fire, kidnappings, and even targeted attacks. In some places, they're arrested just for asking questions. To support war journalists, organizations like Reporters Without Borders provide them with safety gear, such as protective vests and helmets, and offer training on trauma management. In 2024 alone, the group supported over 640 reporters in conflict zones. Still, not all reporters come home.
大家好，第一部分介绍副词 exceptionally， 它的意思是特别或是非常。例如 After her long workout, Moira felt exceptionally hungry. 经过长时间的运动后 Moira 感到格外饥饿。或者 We've had an exceptionally hot summer this year. 今年我们有个异常炎热的夏天。再来看到名词 gear， 表示特定活动的装备、用具或是服装。例如 The photographer packed all her camera gear for the trip. 这名摄影师为了这次旅行打包了他所有的摄影装备。或是 You need to wear protective gear to play American football. 打美式足球时，你需要穿戴防护装备。下一个介绍名词 trauma， 表示心理创伤，也可以是严重外伤或是损伤的意思。可以说 The trauma of the war affected the soldiers' mental health for years. 战争的创伤多年来影响着士兵的心理健康。又或者说 Mr. Bean suffered significant head trauma as a result of the accident. Bean 先生因那起事故而头部受到重创。
Okay, let's talk about the first part of today's lesson. It says, for obvious reasons, working in a war zone is exceptionally dangerous. So it's very obvious if you work in a war zone, it's going to be dangerous. It's not only going to be a little dangerous, but exceptionally dangerous. So here, exceptionally just means very, 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 very dangerous. Okay, part of this word is exception, which means slightly something else. An exception means it's not going to follow the rule. Like, for example, you might get punished for a crime, but an exception might be the son of the police chief. They might let him off. That would be an exception. But here, exceptionally just means beyond dangerous. So dangerous you can't even describe it.
And there you go. Soldiers, of course, are in danger in a war zone, but they have guns, they have commanders, they have protected military bases to go back to. War reporters are often out there between the people fighting, covering the action as it happens. So yes, there are many dangerous jobs in the world, but this one is extra dangerous. And here's an example. Journalists face bombings, sniper fire, kidnappings, and even targeted attacks, among other things. So they face bombings, bombs go off, people throw grenades, artillery shells, bombs drop from planes, large explosions with powerful weaponry that can kill people or cause people to lose an eye, like Marie Colvin did after a bomb went off near her. It could be a bombing in a military sort of situation, or it could be more of a terrorist bombing when someone hides a bomb in a car or a truck and blows it up outside a building in a peaceful part of the world. That is also a word we would use here. So someone is intentionally exploding an explosive device to hurt and kill people. Sniper fire, being shot by someone with a rifle. A sniper rifle will be one with a scope on it, and it can be used more effectively at a longer range. But these snipers, as we call a soldier who has that role, their job is to sort of hide in buildings and pick people off. So they might actually be trying to shoot journalists, or they might mistake the journalist for someone else in darkness or in low light or situations like that. So there's bullets flying around. You can get hit. You could be kidnapped as a journalist. Yes, if you work for an important agency, if you work for CNN or BBC, local forces, often not military forces, not armies, but this would be more in a terrorist type situation or a civil war type situation. They might think if we kidnap this person, we could get a lot of money by ransoming or kind of selling them back to CNN or to the BBC or some big group that we perceive as having lots of money. So they can just be attractive targets for kidnappings when someone grabs a person and sort of steals them away and keeps them locked up somewhere for some purpose. That's a kidnapping. Or even targeted attacks. There are journalists who are well known. The other side doesn't like them, doesn't like the truth and the light that they're bringing to the story, doesn't like the fact that this journalist is making this side look bad. So they actually try to kill these people. They actually try to kill journalists. And this does happen often in third world conflicts, but more and more in other conflicts that we see quite prominently in the news. And in some places, they're arrested just for asking questions. There may be certain rules about having journalists in conflict zones. And if one side feels that this journalist is not really on their side and is not reporting the news the way they like, they could arrest them, kick them out of the country, or just lock them up for a while just to sort of shut them up, to silence their voices.
And some people are trying to help them out. So to support war journalists, organizations like Reporters Without Borders provide them with safety gear such as protective vests and helmets, and offer training on trauma management. Okay, so they're not just out there by themselves. We've got this organization that's trying to help them out. They're trying to support them. They provide them with safety gear. Okay, here gear just means equipment, things that they can use to keep themselves safe, like a protective vest and helmets. Those things can protect you from bullets and things like that, or maybe even protect you when a bomb goes off nearby. Of course, it gets too close to you. There's no way you can be protected from that, but we've got safety gear here, which is similar in meaning to equipment. Remember, gear and equipment are non-count nouns because you have different kinds of equipment and different kinds of gear, big, small, strong, weak, or whatever. So you've got lots of different kinds of gear there. And yes, the vest, of course, is something you wear on your body. It does not have sleeves. And also helmets, they go on your head. You wear a helmet when you ride your scooter to work or to school or whatever. And yes, they also offer some training courses on trauma management. Okay, so if you're working in a war zone, you're going to see some ugly stuff out there. You're going to see people with their arms blown off or whatever, or children suffering, and that will probably have some psychological effect on you. So you need some kind of counseling. So they provide trauma management here. Trauma usually refers to something psychological that happens to you that make you feel bad. It makes you feel bad. Like the examples I just gave there, you might feel trauma because of that. Trauma could also be physical injury. There's like a trauma center in the hospital to handle people who have been injured in some kind of accident or whatever. But here, trauma usually refers to something more in the mind.
And that could also, be physical trauma, first aid. They, teach them how to tie off a leg and make a tourniquet. Those things where you tie off an artery to stop a person bleeding to death if they get shot. So they do offer them basic first aid training. If you or someone around you gets badly injured, this is how you can keep them alive for that golden hour before they can get them back to a medical facility. So all sorts of stuff, very much like a lot of military training. And it's, of course, very important and very real. It says in 2024 alone, the group supported over 640 reporters in conflict zones. So that's showing you how many of these reporters are out there and how many conflicts there are to cover. Still, not all reporters come home. That's just a kind of nice way of saying, even with all that training and all that equipment, reporters do die on the job. All right, let's take a look at the second part of the article.
Despite the risks, reporters keep going to conflict zones. They say the chance to show the world what's really happening outweighs the danger. Some also feel a strong responsibility to be a voice for the voiceless, especially in the age of misinformation.
第二部分看到动词 outweigh， 它的意思是在益处或是重要性意义上大于或是超过。例如 The pros for Andrew finding a new job outweighed the cons. Andrew 找到新工作的利大于弊。再看一个例子 The benefits of buying a hybrid car outweigh the cost. 购买油电混合车所带来的好处比其价格便宜与否更重要。
Okay, here in the second part, which is shorter, it says, despite the risks, even though it is very risky, reporters keep going to conflict zones. Okay, some people just want to do this kind of work. They like living in the fast lane, I guess you could say, or they like having exciting things happen to them.
Or they just feel it's really important for someone to do.
Indeed, yes, they feel a certain obligation to help out society or help out humanity by reporting on this kind of stuff. So they keep going to those conflict zones. They know it's very dangerous to hang out in Gaza right now or to go to Ukraine or even to Mexico to cover the drug wars going on there. So they keep going to conflict zones. And they say the chance to show the world what's really happening outweighs the danger. So that's what they say. That's their idea. Yes, it's kind of exciting, of course, to do that stuff. You can't deny that they probably feel that way to a certain extent, but still, they want to show the world what's really happening. And to be able to do that outweighs the danger. So if something outweighs something, literally it means somebody is heavier than somebody else. I outweigh my wife, for example, by 100 pounds. You could say, for example, I'm not really that heavy. I just use that as an example. But here, it just means it's more important. The chance to show the world what's happening is more important than the danger. It's worth the risk.
And there's also that sense of responsibility. Some also feel a strong responsibility to be a voice for the voiceless, especially in the age of misinformation. You know, if I don't go out there, if we don't go out there, if war reporters aren't out there telling the story and being a voice for the voiceless, this is sort of speaking and representing the civilians, the forgotten innocent people who get caught in the middle of these conflicts, who will, especially in the age of misinformation, when either side in the conflict could be lying and say, no, we're not hurting civilians. No, we didn't blow up that school with all those children in it. That's just lies. I think it's true. I also feel that they need to be there to tell us the truth, because often governments and the sides, that the voices that represent the sides in the conflict will be sort of spinning and, you know, sort of altering the truth to fit their narrative, to fit what makes them look good and what makes the enemy look bad. We need to sort of figure out the truth between these two competing stories. All right, let's look at the third and final part of our article.
What about us, the readers? We also play an important role in supporting trustworthy journalism. We can do this by reading carefully, checking sources, and appreciating the reporters who bring us the truth. Better still, we can directly support organizations like Reporters Without Borders, either through advocacy or donations. By doing so, we can show that we value these brave voices because, without them, much of the world's truth would go unheard.
第三部分介绍单字 trustworthy， 这个形容词指的是可靠的或是值得信赖的。举例来说 Lucy is a trustworthy friend who always keeps her friends' secrets. Lucy 是一个值得信赖的朋友，总是保守朋友的秘密。或是 It's important to find a partner who is trustworthy. 找到一个值得信任的伴侣是很重要的。下一个看到名词 advocacy， 表示提倡、拥护或是主张。例如 In his role as administrator, Mr. Thornton is committed to advocacy for child development. 身为行政长官 Thornton 先生致力于倡导儿童发展。 也可以说 The Human Rights Advocacy Project is in its third decade of important work in that country. 这项人权倡导计划在那个国家进行的重要工作已进入第3个10年。最后看到 donation 这个名词表示捐款或是捐献，可以说 Mrs. Jones made a generous donation to the animal shelter. Jones 夫人向动物收容所慷慨捐赠。最后一个例子 For every $100 donation that you give, a family of 4 will be fed for 1 month. 你每捐献的$100就能为一个4口之家提供1个月的食物。
All right, so far we've been talking about journalists who are covering conflicts in the world. They're working in war zones. But what about us, the readers? Of course, they're working in order to provide this information for us because we're the readers living in a nice, safe place. We're not in a war zone. We're not going to get blown up by a bomb or something like that. So what can we do to help them out? We also play an important role in supporting trustworthy journalism. Okay, so if something's trustworthy, it's worthy of our trust. We should trust that thing. It has earned our trust. And indeed, if you're a journalist or a news agency or a news organization, you need to report the news truthfully, or else people won't want to read your news stories or watch videos on your phone.
That's a very, very good point. We can do this by reading carefully, checking sources, and appreciating the reporters who bring us the truth. So we do have a responsibility as people who are consuming this news to make sure that we're consuming it in a responsible way. Read the stories carefully, even if the stories are kind of depressing. You know, sometimes I look at stories about Gaza and Ukraine and I'm like, oh, I don't want to read this, but it's important to read this stuff. It's not affecting you like it's affecting the people who actually live there. So we have a responsibility to be, even from a distance, witnesses to what they are living through and what is going on. We should check sources. Make sure that you're not just believing one side or the other in their sort of rosy depiction of what's happening in these conflict zones. Find out what actually is happening, and you can do that through checking sources and making sure you're not just getting one side of the story, and appreciate the reporters who bring us the truth. Read their reports. If you see them on the internet, like them, follow them, write comments on how you appreciate the very difficult work they're doing. I'm sure that means a lot to these people as they're out there covering some of the worst stories in the world. Better still, it says we can directly support organizations like Reporters Without Borders, either through advocacy or donations. Yeah, some direct support would be great. Reporters Without Borders just recently in the last few years moved their Asian office to Taipei, to Taiwan. And I think that is a great show of support for Taiwan. They felt that they couldn't cover journalism, they couldn't do their journalism and support reporters in other countries in Asia because of government interference and things like that. So that's a great thing. Reporters Without Borders, they have their offices here. So we can do that through advocacy, through sort of speaking for them and raising awareness, through, sharing articles like this one, or more directly, financially, through donations. Give them money. They need money. This is a charity. This is a non-governmental organization, an NGO, and like most of them, they're not swimming in cash. So you can donate to them, and that money, I'm sure, will be doing good things like possibly buying body armor and helmets for reporters to go off to other dangerous parts of the world.
Right, and better still could also be expressed as better yet. It just means this is even better than what we just mentioned here. And of course, advocacy means you're sort of promoting a certain kind of cause or something. And a person who does that is an advocate. The verb is to advocate, advocacy, and advocate. That's the person, and donations, as you said, is just money that or support that you give to a charity. Now, by doing so, we can show that we value these brave voices because without them, much of the world's truth would go unheard. So yes, indeed, we do need to support reporters in the field, no matter what their political bias may be. We want to have everybody tell all points of view from various certain kinds of situations and conflicts or whatever. We want to get the whole story. So yes, indeed, we need to pretty much read as much as we can. And yes, indeed, we need to support these reporters because without them, hey, we're not going to know the truth. We're going to be lied to by pretty much every news organization out there. And yes, indeed, the truth will go unheard. If something goes unheard, well, you just won't hear about it at all. It will be a mystery, even though it did happen. Maybe lots of people got killed or something, but we won't know about it because the reporters simply weren't there and they weren't supported enough to let us know about that tragic occurrence. Okay, we're at the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our beloved Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分第一句提到 Despite the risks, reporters keep going to conflict zones. 尽管危险重重，记者们仍持续前往冲突区。好，那么这边要介绍句型 despite 或者是 in spite of 加上名词逗号主词加动词，这样的句型可以表达尽管怎么样，虽然怎么样。其中的 despite 和 in spite of 是介系词，它的后面是要接名词或动名词。举例来说 Margot went to work despite being sick. 尽管生病 Margot 还是去上班。那特别注意，如果要在 despite 或者是 in spite of 后面接子句，这时候必须先接名词同位语，像是 the fact， 然后再接 that 子句，所以就会写作 despite the fact 或者是 in spite of the fact，再接 that 子句。例如 Despite the fact that he had very little experience, he was offered the job. 尽管他几乎没有什么经验，他还是得到那份工作了。那其实我们也可以直接改用连接词 though 或是 although 去连接子句，表达虽然尽管的语义。所以刚刚这个前半句 Despite the fact that he had very little experience， 这部分可以改成although 或者是 though he had very little experience 这样子。好，那么课文第三部分有一句提到，更好的做法是我们可以透过倡议或者是捐款直接支持像无国界记者这样的组织。文中是用名词 advocacy 去表达提倡、拥护或主张，那它的相关词性 advocate当名词表示提倡者、拥护者。我们这边来补充一下它的字根，看到 VOC、VOK 或是 VOW 这一类字根有 call、speak、sound、voice 等等的意思，表示说话叫喊或是声音。在 advocate 这个字当中，字首 AD 表示朝向，字根 VOC 表示说话，ATE 可以当动词字尾或名词字尾。那同学们就可以联想对大众、朝着大众发言的人，那就是去大力提倡某件事的人。所以 advocate 当名词就可以表达提倡者、拥护者，它也可以当动词念作 advocate， 表达拥护、提倡或主张。顺便补充两个这一类字根的单字。第一个 provoke， 它的字首 PRO 表示在点点点之前，字根 voke 表示叫喊。当有人在前面叫喊着，好像那种呛虾，带有那种挑衅意味，应该就可以联想到 provoke 它有挑衅、煽动或者是激怒、激起的意思。第二个补充的是 evoke， 它的字首 E 有向外、由内向外的语义， voke 表示叫喊，那么字面意思就是向外呼喊，而这个字以前多多少少带有那种呼唤亡灵的语义，所以应该很容易联想到evoke 它有唤起、引起的意思，那也常常用来表达唤起某个记忆啊、印象等等。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Exceptionally. Belinda felt exceptionally tired after working for over 12 hours without a break. Kidnap. Dozens of police officers are currently searching for the child who was kidnapped from the park. Gear. The photographer carried his camera gear and some extra film in a large backpack. Trauma. Arthur has been receiving treatment aimed at helping him recover from a childhood trauma. Donation. Mr. and Mrs. Russo recently made a generous donation to support the local children's hospital.
Discussion starter starts now!
It's time now for our discussion starter. And the question is, do you think that being a war reporter has become more or less dangerous in recent years, and why?
Well, I would say I believe that these journalists face more danger these days than they used to, given that there seems to have been a sort of loss of this idea that reporters are protected individuals in conflict zones. It used to be that killing a reporter was a very bad thing for one side or the other to do, so they were given some kind of special treatment there. That seems to have weakened a bit recently, because the number of journalists killed in conflict zones has just been going up over the last several decades. And so there does seem to be more of that idea that journalists are part of the action, not just they're separate from the action reporting on it. For some groups and some governments, they are actually legitimate targets on the battlefield if that reporter is not reporting in a way that you would agree with.
Well, I think these journalists face less danger because even though we get lots of information about various conflicts in the world, I think there are fewer conflicts going on right now than there were in the past. I think people were maimed and tortured and killed a lot more in the past than they are in present day. So yes, indeed, I think the reporters are probably not suffering as much as it looks like. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.